I made this Paw Patrol nightlight from a 3D printed lithophane in just a few minutes. It fits right on a standard nightlight that I purchased from Home Depot for under $3. You likely have one of these at home already that you can use. It's got a light sensitive sensor, so it's never using energy when the room is lit. In this video, I'll show you how to make one yourself. All the software used is free, so the only cost besides the $3 nightlight is a few pennies worth of 3D printing filament. If you've never heard of lithophanes before, I made a whole video describing their history and usage with a tutorial on how to create them. You can check this video out by clicking on the link in this video's description. That one goes a little bit deeper than we will today, walking you through every step in detail. My nephew loves Paw Patrol and has a birthday coming up, so I figured this is a sure win. But you can use this video to make a nightlight of any image or subject that you'd like. Here I'm going to walk you through how. Okay, so we can get started just by navigating over to itslitho.com. Click on Get Started. This will open up into a blank model. So we're going to go to the Upload tab to put our image in that model. And when I do, I see it pops up right over here. If we were to go over to our model and start modeling that out, we'll notice that we have all this white space that we don't want. And that's because our image itself has a lot of white space. So we can come over to the Edit tab and we can crop it in on the left and on the right. This is something you could do in a photo editing tool, but in this case, it's simple enough that we can do it right here in the app. Now we can navigate back over to the model tab and we'll see that the image is cropped the way that I want it. So we have a few options here. First is our shape option. We're going to switch from plane to arc. And the arc gives you an opportunity to determine just how much of a curve you want. I left mine at 100mm height. That's about 3 3/4 inches, which seems about perfect. The angle, however, I went up to about 120. And if you angle it too much, you're going to notice that if you were to say go up to something like 180 or something crazy, then from far away, you're only going to be able to see part of the image. Either way, you're not going to be able to see the whole image because it's curved. But I don't want to go that far, so I'm going to go to like 120. And it's lit. You can set your minimum and maximum thickness. I find that what the default settings, what they have there, are just fine. The next thing I want to work on is my frame. It's a bit thick. It can be tempting to go to none and say that we don't want a frame, but this is a pretty thin piece of material, and it's going to need all the support it can get while it's printing. So I'm going to say that I do want a frame. I just want to make it a bit thinner. So I'm going to go down to about 1.5 and then change my depth and also my angle, which will make it more of a border instead of a beveled edge. Great. Image quality, this is just our preview quality. It doesn't matter. But here is where we get to the one thing we don't want to miss, which is our attributes. You could enable a lamp, which is a little lamp that they sell on this website. You can pop an LED light in there. We're going to go ahead and say Nightlight, and that will pop up this little shelf, and that shelf is what's going to sit on your nightlight. It gives you a few measurement options, so let's take a look at what those are. Distance refers to the distance between the main plate and the light bulb. 20 years ago, this might have been a concern with light bulbs getting too hot, but any CFL or LED bulb is not going to produce any measurable heat, so the default is just fine. Width is the size of the cutout, and the default of 17 will fit pretty much any nightlight. And the depth is a measurement from the front of the plate to the back of the shelf. All of these are set by default to standard nightlight specs, so there's little need to change them. If your width is too narrow, you can always use some sandpaper or an X-Acto to widen it. Whereas if it's too wide, you can always put a piece of tape on it to close it up a little bit. The one thing you don't want to change is your thickness. If you do, you run the risk of it not fitting on the neck of the nightlight. Keep it at 1.7. Now that our settings are dialed in, we can hit download and then download our lithophane to an STL file. Now we can move over to our Ultimaker Cura app and start a new project by opening our file, that STL that we just saved, which will pop up on our build plate. We need to make a few adjustments to our print settings. By default, our quality is set at fine, which is perfect, and if it's not on yours, then you want to change it to fine. And then when it comes to the infill, we're going to change that 20 to 99 and infill pattern to grid. We want to do this because it's usually set pretty low to save your material, but because we're dealing with something that is reliant on translucency and things that are opaque being extremely opaque, like the thick parts of our image, we want to make sure that they're as dense as possible. We're also going to change the speed from the default of 50 down to 20 just to slow the machine down and make sure that it's as precise of a print as possible. We're not going to need any supports or even a brim around the bottom because we have this shelf which is going to do that job for us. And now we're ready to slice it and send it to our printer.